Hi, everyone. My name is Sally Beauchamp, and I am the parent mentor for the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I want to welcome you today to our webinar. I'm going to be joined today with Hayley, Cason, Grobbel, who is the parent mentor for South Oakland, and Susaye Brewer, who is the parent mentor for Genesee County. Next slide, please. So today, this is what we're going to be discussing. We're going to define what debriefing means and why it's important, effective components of debriefing, how to incorporate school communication, how to have debriefing conversations with your child, and present different methods and activities to help with this process. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Susaye, who's going to give us the definition of debriefing.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, debriefing, what is it and why does it matter? Next slide, please. Debriefing means it is a structured conversation aimed at reviewing events, experiences, and feelings. It helps to process the day's activities, address any issues, and plan. Debriefing is a supportive and informative process for students to reflect on their day. Next slide. Now, the purpose of debriefing. It is for families of children with disabilities. Debriefing is crucial to understand your child's experiences, address any concerns, and provide emotional support. Next slide. So why is learning how to debrief so important? So by building a deeper connection with your child, this gives connection by providing a consistent opportunity for open communication, allowing your child to express their thoughts and their feelings. This practice helps to reinforce trust, ensures your child to feel supported. With emotional support, this helps your child to feel heard and understood. Now, after showing that emotional support to your child, this provides a platform for you as a parent to execute your problem-solving techniques. This will help you identify and address issues they may have encountered in their day. Learning how to debrief is important because it brings routine and stability to the table. This creates a consistent end-of-the-day routine, providing comfort, predictability for your child. This will also bring improved communication. This enhances communications between you and your child, creating a supportive relationship. Next slide. Hayley.
So next, we're going to discuss the different components of debriefing to keep in mind while you're having these conversations. Next slide. Thank you. So first, you want to consider the environment where you're having these debriefing conversations. You know your child best. Do they need calm and quiet to have a conversation, or maybe they need a chance to get the wiggles out while they're talking? You might do well having these conversations in the car on the way home, or you might need to wait till they're home to settle down and talk about how their day went. Some kids might need to talk about school immediately after getting home so they don't forget details, while other kids might need a break between school and debriefing to be able to have reflected on it enough to discuss clearly. You know your child best, so do what works for them. Next slide. So next, consider the timing of your conversation. Make sure you're picking a consistent time to do this. So like I said in the previous slide, maybe you do really well having this conversation in the car on the way home. Have your debriefing conversation during that time each day to keep things consistent. You can also add a debriefing activity at another routine time, like dinner time, for the whole family. I mentioned timing in the previous slides to really consider which environment impacts the time you're having these conversations. School days can be long and stressful for kids, so maybe for your family, it makes sense to discuss the school day on the car ride home. For others, maybe kids need a few minutes to decompress or relax before they want to discuss school. I know my kids usually need a snack and some sensory input. Maybe they need to spend some time running around outside or watch a show or something like that to decompress. Then we can talk about other things. Do what works best for your child and your family. For a long time, I would try to ask my oldest about their day right when I picked them up, and they would just shut down entirely. When we started doing a break, a snack, maybe getting some energy out before having those conversations, it was much easier to get them to talk about how their day went. Next slide. You want to try to make sure that you're asking open-ended questions. If your question is just yes or no, it might not lead to a productive conversation. You really want to invite them to share their feelings with you to build that connection. If you do ask yes or no questions, that's fine, but just follow up with guided conversational ones. So one example would be to maybe start out asking if they went to art that day. When they say yes, you can ask a deeper question like, what was your favorite part of art class today? What did you use in art class today? It's really about connecting the pieces and encouraging kids to reflect on their days. And sometimes yes or no questions can make that a little bit difficult. Next slide, and Sally's going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the components of debriefing.
Okay, another important thing to consider is the age of your child. Do they need multiple short questions throughout a span of time, or do they have the focus needed for one long conversation? And you can make it fun for younger kids. Like if you have a preschooler or kindergarten, they haven't developed a lot of language yet. So their response to your question of, what did you do fun today in school? You might only get a 1 or 2 word answer. But as your child gets older, 4th, 5th grade, you can ask them the same question and might go on with much more detail, and, it would be more of a longer conversation. Right now, my son, he is an adult. And so and he works. So I'm not asking him about school now. I'm asking him about his work day. And when he comes home from work, I have to approach it in an adult manner than when he was a young child. So now, since he's practiced this, he's very good at letting me know about what things happen at work. So just not very long ago, he came home from his job. He works at a hotel. And previously, he had always worked Sundays, but not Saturday. Well, his schedule got changed and he had to start working on Saturdays. So 2 times he has come home early from work. And when he came home this last time, I asked him, well, what happened? And he said that there were kids. There was lots of kids in the lobby where he cleans, and he was getting mad and frustrated. So he left. So I had to, did you tell anybody, that you had to leave? And he said that he had talked to the concierge. And then we talked about it. And we both decided that maybe it was better to contact his supervisor and ask if he could go back to working Sundays instead of Saturdays, because he has autism. So he gets more anxious when there's a lot of kids around. He's not good with little kids because they make noise and they're unpredictable. So we texted the main housekeeper, and she agreed to let him go back on Sundays. So that's why this is kind of an important skill to learn. When he was younger, when he would come home and he'd say something like, my teacher was a bully today, then I knew something had gone awry, and I had to probe a little bit deeper and find out what it was. And then more than likely, I would follow that up by contacting the school to make sure that the teacher was aware of it, and myself, that we had this communication going. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of you might have children that are nonverbal, or they don't have a lot of language skills. So use the preferred mode of communication. Do they use an augmentative and alternative communication device, AAC? If so, utilize that. Is it easier to talk to them if they're not expected to make eye contact? Are they exhausted after a full school day with hearing aids and find it less stimulating to sign? Do what works best for your child because you, as Hayley said, know them the best. So plan your debriefing for the appropriate time of day. Like my son did not want to talk about school when he got home. I had to usually wait and we would talk about things at dinner time. Okay, next slide, and Susaye is going to take over.
Susaye, you're
Susaye,
muted.
I'm sorry about that. Thanks, Sally. Active listening is a form of validation. So when you are actively listening, you are going to listen attentively without interruption, showing empathy and understanding, and validate your child's feelings and experiences by acknowledging their emotions and challenges. So, for example, when your child comes home from school, make sure you set aside about 15 or 20 minutes in a calm and quiet, free environment, free from distractions. Ensure that the environment is comfortable. Make sure the electronic devices are turned off so there won't be any interruptions in your conversation. Sit down together at eye level with your child and ask open-ended questions about their day, demonstrating active listening and validating their responses. So when actively listening, make sure you paraphrase, ask questions, and give them a platform to elaborate. Look attentive and use positive body language. Evaluate conversation and ask follow-up questions. That is so important before giving your advice. So let me paint a picture in your mind. Let's say your child says this.
I felt really sad at school today because no one wanted to play with me at recess, and then later I didn't understand the math lesson.
It sounds like you felt a little lonely and frustrated today because you had trouble finding someone to play with and understanding your math lesson. Everyone feels lonely at times. It's okay to feel lonely, and you can always try to find someone to play with tomorrow. And maybe you can talk to your teacher about someone to play with, someone to help you with your math lesson. So, in response, you can see how I paused and then I paraphrased their feelings to show that I did understand and I understood. And I also offered some possible solutions. So, remember though, listening may just be enough. At times, people just want to have us listen and have their voice heard. Next slide. Discussing challenges. When discussing challenges, offer support. Validate your child's feelings. Seek additional help. Keep conversation going and ask your child what they think might help and offer your own suggestions. For example, what do you think, that can make math a little bit easier for you? Maybe you can ask the teacher for some extra help. Just remember this, highlight the positives. Make sure they are recognized for putting in their own work. Positive feedback is vital to student success. Next slide. Sally?
Okay, so one way to validate your child's feelings is to acknowledge their emotions, repeat their feelings aloud to show you understand, normalize what they feel, and work together to create an action. So when you are talking to your child, it's important to repeat their feelings out loud. I think this is really important because of my own experiences with my son who has autism. And he still has trouble identifying what someone else is feeling, or sometimes even what he's feeling. So I remember when he was smaller, young, we would use pictures that showed different emotions. And he would have to identify those emotions. And sometimes we would act them out. so that he would understand it better. Um, you can say things like, it sounds like you're feeling really annoyed because this happened, or you seem upset because, this happened. So normalize what they feel. I have this really horrific prom story. I can't go into all the detail, it'll take us forever, but the gist of it was his dates that he had at the prom, they left during the dance. And so he had this, terrible experience of being rejected. And like any typical heterosexual male, he wants a girlfriend still, and he wanted one in high school. But after that prom experience, he was like, I'm never gonna, go to a dance again or ask a girl. I'm not gonna have a girlfriend because they're just gonna reject me. So I had to explain to him that, Ross, this is a typical thing that happens. And I would use my own experiences, his dad's family members, about their heartbreaks, and just try to explain it's all part of dating. I even used his favorite cartoon at the time was SpongeBob, and there was an episode where Pearl, her prom date rejects her. So I tried to make him understand that yes, being rejected is very painful, but it's also very typical, and everyone feels that. And it was just part of growing up. And I also wanted to remind him that there are people that love him, his family members and other people that really love him, and they're not going to ever reject him no matter what he does. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Action plan. Okay, so if you an action plan is used to develop to address any issues or concerns that occur during the day. And it helps you to work with your child to solve problems. And you can create a plan moving forward when your child runs into similar situations. And when you do make up an action plan, you have to remember to do your part. And with an action plan, this helps prevent the same thing from happening over and over. When Ross was young, I did not write up an action plan like on piece of paper. I didn't have the time, and I totally appreciate those parents that can do that. Kudos to you. I'm more of the seat of my pants kind of person, and I know that's not the best method, but it's just how I am. But what I did do was I tried to immediately address the problem when it came about. You need to remember also that when you make up an action plan, you are part of it as well. So you have to do your part if you expect your child to do theirs. So for instance, if you want your child to create some independence by paying for their own lunch, well, then you have to make sure as a parent that there's money in the lunch account. So there's no hoopla when he or she goes to the lunch and tries to pay. If they're struggling with something, you need to make sure that you contact the person, maybe yourself. Like if they're having problems with where they're sitting, then you have to maybe write to the teacher or call the teacher and say, he's struggling with this seating chart. Can we maybe change it? And I also think that it's super critical for parents to maintain that communication with the school and the teacher, the parapros, who's ever working with your child. Like I mentioned earlier, I still text the hotel supervisor to check on how well Ross is doing with his job, because I know that job is super important to him. He'd be devastated if he lost it. And I don't want any surprises. So that's why I try to maintain communication. And that's why it's important to maintain communication with the school, which leads us to our next slide, which Hayley is going to present.
So this is all about incorporating school communication. I feel like this is a pretty huge chunk of debriefing and really the purpose that we want to get to. So we know that hearing your child's perspective on the day is super important. You want to hear, what they ate for lunch. You want to hear about their friends. But it's also really important to consider the communication that you're getting from the school. So if your student has a planner, a communication log, emails from the teacher, something like that, make sure you check in frequently to make sure that your student is not having issues at school that they maybe don't want to talk about or don't know they need to talk about. Or, and it's something that happened in my case, make sure that they are giving you the accurate information. It's sometimes it could be as simple as looking at their communication log and saying like, "Oh, you had a happy face or a green day today," or "It looks like you might have been feeling frustrated during gym. What was happening?" It's just really important to stay on top of all of that communication. It's also important to stay on top of the current school schedule and what they're learning about so that you can ask them appropriate questions about their day. So it's hard to ask them about subtraction and addition problems when they're on multiplication. You need to have a basic understanding of where they're at in the curriculum to be able to really ask them engaging questions about what they're doing. And also if there are issues with the content that they're learning, it helps you have a better position to ask the teacher for some more help. You also want to um, keep on top of the report cards, the progress reports, standardized testing, any evaluations. If your child has an IEP, you really want to check in with those progress reports as well and make sure that teachers are communicating with you the progress that's being made on their goals. If you're getting calls home, good or bad, you should discuss it with with your child. um you want to make sure that you are, if it's a bad call home, you want to make sure that you're getting their side of the story. You also, if it's a good call home, you want to take the time to really strengthen that and give that positive reinforcement with your student. So maybe they did a great job not interrupting their peers all day, and you want to just tell them, so and so called me. You did such a good job today listening with your ears. My kids are younger, so we do a lot of listening with our ears. Um, and so you want to really reinforce those positive calls home that you're getting to and make sure that they know that they're being recognized for putting in that hard work. If you are getting calls home, though, good or bad, make sure that you're logging them somewhere because this is data that you can use during your next IEP meeting if there's a need for a functional behavioral assessment. Don't always assume that the school records that information. It's important for you to keep a paper trail on your end as well. I know we have some resources on our website about like keeping an IEP binder. I like to keep those communications in our binder also so that during the next meeting I can discuss it with the teacher. If the student is coming home sad or upset, but the teacher reports they had a great day at school, try to take the time to figure out what could be causing that discrepancy. Does your student feel they aren't being heard or understood correctly? Are they struggling with a subject? Maybe if they're neurodivergent, they feel like they have to mask or cover up some of those behaviors often. And when they come home, they're exhausted and dysregulated from having to really kind of hide their innate um, reactions to things. Or perhaps it's the opposite. Your student, this has happened to me several times, your student comes home in a super positive, upbeat, happy mood, but you know that the teacher called you and sent a note home about concerning behaviors. In both instances, it's really important to figure out what the facts of the matter are. There's always more than two sides to every story. You want to try and figure out what your child is saying that's accurate, what the teacher is saying that's accurate, and figure out how they connect to each other. Depending on your student's age or comfort, there may be times that you need to communicate with the teacher directly. If it's a significant concern, you can always CC other teachers, staff, specialists who work with your student, the principal, if you feel like that might be helpful. Keep this in mind, especially if your child comes home and says, like, oh, I haven't been to resource room, or I didn't go to the see whichever teacher or speech person. If they're not getting services they're supposed to, that's a big issue that the school needs to solve, and you definitely want to include the appropriate staff members in your communications. And then, yeah, so that's a lot for school communication. Lizette, could you go to the next slide, please? So it sounds like a lot, but it is really easy to add it to your routine. So keep an eye out for creative ways to add it to things that you're already doing. The more you talk about school, the more opportunities there are for your student to naturally communicate about their wins and about anything they're struggling with. So if you have like a morning getting ready routine, you could discuss anticipated activities for the day during breakfast or brushing hair that can help prepare your student for any possible changes in scheduling, anything that you think they might struggle with. Just, like I've said before, and like Sally has said, your child. You want to make sure that you are connecting those pieces for them before they happen too. So maybe they have a presentation and you can offer some pointers and you've practiced and you can remind them, you know exactly what you're saying. We practiced it last night. You're going to do great. Give them that encouragement. You can also just work together to solve problems and make a plan. So maybe they're sensitive to loud noises and sounds, and you know that they have music class on Tuesday. So on Tuesday morning, you could offer them a reminder to make sure they bring their noise canceling headphones with them to music class so it won't be as stressful for them. When you debrief after school, like we've said, try to do it when you have their attention and when they're at their most talkative. So for your family, maybe that's when you're doing homework together or when they're stuck in the car with you on the way home or to an activity. Just find a time that works best for your family. You can always make debriefing collaborative. So you can include parents or other adults in the household, younger and older siblings, etc. It can be as easy as going around the table and asking each person what your favorite part of the day was. I know they do that in Bluey, and my kids are, like I said, kindergarten and first grade, and they are very into Bluey still, thankfully. But I know there's an episode where they go around the table and they're saying, what their favorite part of the day was, and it's a really good example of building that communication and that collaboration. You could also say, like, tell us two good parts and one bad part. Um, Keep in mind that sometimes, especially when there's conflict or tension in the school, they might not be as open to talking in front of the rest of the family. You're their parent, or maybe a sibling is a safe person who could have this conversation too. You can always tell when things might be a little off, and you want to make sure they have the chance to talk privately or express those concerns in a non-judgmental environment. I have two kids who are about a year apart in age. And I can usually get a sense for when the conversations are really appropriate for us to all have together at the same time because it's problems they are both going to eventually have to deal with, or when one of my kids needs a lot more individualized support or privacy with the frustrations. Next slide. So now that you know all the elements of debriefing, let's talk about how to do it successfully. There is nothing wrong with just asking how their day was, but depending on their kid, this will probably only give you snippets of what they find noteworthy. So usually my son will just say good and think that the conversation is completely over if that is how I've started. So instead, I found it helpful to pick a few topics to talk about and try to change it up each day. I think maybe thinking about like two things they'll be very interested to talk to you about, and one thing that you want to know more about. Typically, it's more than just 3 topics, but me coming up with 3 open-ended questions are a really good way to initiate that conversation, even when they don't seem as talkative. Um, it's also, like we've said, like Susaye said too, make sure that you highlight the positives. No matter how small, a win is a win. Make sure they're getting recognized for putting in the work. Positive feedback is vital to student success. I remember when my son was in kindergarten, uh, his teacher really struggled with him to get him to zip his coat up at the end of each day, and it gets pretty cold in the winter. And I remember he came out of school one day in January and just beaming and said, "I zipped my coat all by myself." And his teacher came out after him and was like, he zipped his coat all by himself. And we had like a little mini celebration at pickup that day. And he was just in such a good mood for the rest of the day and so proud to tell everybody that he had finally figured it out and could do it all by himself. If you need more ideas for how to start the conversation, we have a few activities on the following slides for you to try. So if you could go to the next slide. And then I also wanted to mention before we get started that all of these activities and a lot of these tips are included on the handout that Lizette has linked into the chat for all of you guys. So this is a really easy one, a 5-finger debrief. So to do a 5-finger debrief, you put your hand up, you point to your thumb, and you say something that made you feel happy that day. Your index finger is something that you're excited about. Your middle finger is something you're unsure about or that might have made you feel uneasy. Your ring finger is something you did today that you'd like to do again or like to keep doing. And then finally, your pinky finger is something that made you laugh. You can do a whole hand and go around in a circle at the dinner table, or just one-on-one, do one finger at a time back and forth with your kid. And you participating in this conversation with them will really help to encourage that connection. Next slide, and Sally will take over from here.
Okay, another activity you could do is the rose, bud, and thorn activity, where you have a picture or a real rose or an artificial one where the rose flower petals is what you discuss positive, something that made your child feel good that day. The thorn, if they point to the thorn or you do, they discuss something that made them upset or mad or disappointed. And the bud would be the discussion about something new or exciting or what they're looking forward to, maybe in the week or the next day. Next slide, please. Another couple of ideas is yeah, oops, and blah, which if you say, yeah, this reveals something that you're excited about. Oops, you reveal an embarrassing moment, a mistake, or a misunderstanding. Blah, something that is challenging or upsetting at that moment. And then there's the other one, mad, glad, and sad. Mad, you talk about something frustrating or something that made you angry, maybe a moment when you had a weird feeling in your tummy or a frown on your face. Glad, you talk about a moment that made you smile and feel happy. Sad, talk about something that made you upset and feel like you want to cry. Next slide. So another great idea is the question jar, where you see there's a copy of like a worksheet that you can have the questions already printed out for you. You just cut them in little strips and you put them in a jar. And then your child, when they come home or whatever, they pick a slip or one or two out of the jar. And that's what you guys talk about. Another good idea to do this would be writing your questions down on popsicle sticks and putting them in the jar, and then your child picks out a popsicle stick. And you don't have to use the ones that are here, but these are just ideas on how to get you started with this. Okay, next slide about, and this one's going to cover how we as parent mentors and our staff debrief with our children, and Hayley is going to present this.
So everyone who works at Michigan Alliance for Families is either the parent of or a family member of someone with and a disability. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we debrief with our children who either have or had IEPs in the past. Lizette, could you go to the next slide? And these are my babies. Next school starts in about a week and a half, and I'll have a first grader and a kindergartner this year. So last year they were in kindergarten and the GSRP pre-K program. So my older child does not want to discuss school with me at all. We have to kind of trick him into talking about it every day. He loves his friends and will tell me when people get in trouble. He's also really good at telling me when he was a helper that day. So he'll say, you know, one of his friends got hurt on the playground and he helped walk them to the nurse's office. And he's always really proud to tell me about that. But if we want to know more about anything academic or educational, we have to be kind of sneaky. Like, what did you guys talk about after breakfast today? What special did you have? What did you talk about with your friends during lunch? Did you learn anything exciting today? Even when he says no, he didn't learn anything or he shuts the conversation down, we try to respect it and maybe find a new way to bring it up later. Um, my my younger child, however, wants to tell me every single detail about the school day. As soon as I pick her up, I get the full report of who was absent, why she thinks they were absent, what they did in class, what each person brought for lunch that day. My kids have always been opposites in most ways, and it's helpful for me because I pick her up from well, how it worked last year, I would pick her up from school first. She would have about 10 minutes to get her whole spiel out, and then we would pick up her brother. And it was typically pretty helpful for us to have some sort of conversation in the car on the way home from school because my son is a little bit more likely to participate if it means he doesn't have to just listen to his sister talk for 20 minutes straight. We also, I know that Sally talked about action plans, and we do a lot of sort of action plan in advance. So preparing before the school day starts too. So I know it's summer. A couple weeks ago, we went on vacation. We were flying. My kids haven't flown in a little bit. So for my daughter, who has a lot of anxiety, it was really important for us to talk about what the day was going to look like. And so we talked about, you know, we would wake up in the morning, we would drive to the airport, we would go through TSA. I was able to find some videos on YouTube of other kids who are autistic going through TSA and experience the airport. Um, and it was really helpful for her. So when we got to the airport, she was saying, okay, so first we need to drop off our bag. And now we're going to go talk to security. But she was very adamant. We're going to be quiet and we're going to be good listeners at security. And she had a whole plan moving forward. And it was the smoothest travel day I've had in my whole life. I don't think it could get better than so. I find that really incorporating the action plans into our days is really helpful. It's nothing formal, just like Sally was saying, we're also a fly by the seat of our pants family, but my daughter really thrives on plans and it's helpful to help try and make one up with her. Sally, you want to talk?
Yeah, okay. So this is my son Ross, and he just turned 27 yesterday. This picture was taken a couple years ago. This is his own home. He lives next door to me. So he has his independence, but still has mom close by. He does have a community living support person that comes and works with him daily. So that gives me a little bit of time off. But anyway, when he was growing up, I was an high school English teacher. So when I came home from school, I usually had to correct papers and, all that teacher stuff. So I didn't really have a lot of time to debrief. But what we did was at dinner time, we would all share our day. Like his dad would talk about his job and I would talk about my school day. And then Ross would participate and talk about his day. So the thing with Ross, he has autism and he does not like to talk about himself. So I had to be very direct with him. We couldn't beat around the bush because you got maybe 10 minutes and then he's agitated and he doesn't want to talk anymore. So when his caseworkers come from the mental health agency for their interviews, they have about that much time, 10 minutes to ask their question. And pretty soon Ross is, getting irritated and he wants to retreat. So it's important for his style to be very direct. And like I mentioned before, if he came home from school and said his teacher was a bully, I knew that this was, something happened and I need to look into it. And so what I did when he was really small, like in the early elementary grades, we would have a daily communication book between me and the teacher. And sometimes I would use that, whatever the teacher wrote in the notebook, for our conversation as to how to have our conversation that day. And then when he got a little bit older, I would have Ross attend his IEP meetings with me. He might not be there for the whole time. Like when it first started, he might only be in there for a little while and he would talk to the teachers about, the positive things. And then he would leave and go back to class. And I also would take him to workshops that Michigan Alliance offered. I know one we had here, it was offered in our local library on guardianship. And so Ross was high school age and I took him to that. And the person that was presenting the workshop, he had everybody introduce themselves. And when it got to Ross, he introduced himself and he said, "And I have ideas." And just that simple little statement, I think, validated, that he is the person we're here for. And it validated his feelings to him and everybody in that room. So it's really important to make sure that, you're communicating with your child. And I want to emphasize that every family dynamic is different. Okay. So what works for you or works for me isn't always going to be the same. So the tools that we're presenting to you today are just that. They're tools for you to take home or tweak, or you may use them, you might not use them at all, but they're for you. And however you get your child to relate to you about their day is the main thing. Because as it all boils down to, someday your little toddler isn't going to be a toddler anymore. They're going to be a grown man or woman, and they need to know how to express their feelings to their boss or a coworker or a community support person. And I know every parent that has a kid with a disability, their biggest fear is, oh my God, what's going to happen to my kid when I'm not here anymore? So by teaching them these skills, it gives you some peace of mind that when they're older, they have that skill. And it also gives your child their independence that they need. Okay, and the last slide is Susaye.
All righty. My son, and when I say son, I'm talking about SUN, my sunshine. So here is CJ. He's 19 years old. He um, is my joy. He just recently graduated from high school. He happened to have autism, and he is one who does not like to be around small children. Maybe that's a person with autism thing. I don't know. But um, basically, before when he would actually catch the bus, he would actually, talk to me and kind of express some of his concerns and say, I'm getting ready to get on the bus, with younger children. And, he would always express, the fact that it was probably a little noisy. So what I would do would begin with asking about Okay, well, let's figure out how we can kind of approach this situation. So, I would kind of, let him know that, it's okay to express that you're kind of frustrated, and because the bus is a little noisy, I would always validate his feelings. I would show empathy about his situation. And then I would also kind of remind him, but also giving him a platform to kind of solve his own problem, but with supports, letting him know, well, did you, use your noise canceling headphones, or did you bring your cell phone, or, and I still give him that platform if it, of telling me if it was enough, or if it was if effective enough or not. I would also sometimes remind him of using other tools. Maybe you can use a stress ball or different things like that. So the one thing that's so kind of funny is that this is his life when he was in high school. Now that he's graduated from high school and he's attending like a work transition, work skill programming, he was excited to know that he didn't have to ride on the bus with children going to his work skill program. So, but the bus driver had to break the news to him and let him know, well, after school, you will be riding with those kids. So, CJ, with, concern, he would actually, bring that back up to my attention. And I would actually, explain to him how he would be able to, just give him some reminders, some suggestions. Hey, did you bring this, or did you do this? And did you bring your headphones and different things like that? And he would let me know that he has done that. I want to bring something up that just happened recently, when he was in his transition school. And I say the first couple of weeks when he was actually training for workplace experience, he noticed that the classroom was noisy. And he came home and he brought that to my attention. And I said, oh, really? It was, a little noisy. What do you think you need to do? Now, mind you, my son has been going to his IEP meeting since he's been like maybe 6 years old. And I didn't think, just like Sally, I didn't really think, you know, he was really in tune or paying attention. And he was surprised when I told him, when he had basically shared with me how noisy his classroom was, and I get ready to intervene, he says, I think we need that IEP meeting. So there you go. He was able to utilize some of his own advocacy tools, and he utilized some of those suggestions and reminders that I shared with him. So I just wanted to kind of share with you that, in conversation, just, use those type of reinforcements. Those are coping strategies, and you can, demonstrate those supports by finding solutions and making that person feel comfortable. Next slide. Sally?
Okay, these are some of the tips our other parent mentors shared with us for this webinar. Sherry Kenworthy, who is our parent mentor supervisor, she says, at her house with her son, they immediately gave attention to whatever needed to be done or discussed. They did the homework right away. Any discussions about behavior, they did it immediately because they were in the school mode. And it was much more difficult to go back to discussing things if their attention turned to preferred activities like video games and playing outside, etc. And then once they were done, they were done. There was no more talking about problems. And then they could enjoy the rest of the evening and be energized for the following day. Next slide, please. And then our statewide trainer, Stephanie Nichols, shared with us a worksheet kind of thing that they used with their student. And then she says that we program similar options in their AAC device, which is the alternative augmented communication device. And they connected that with their communication system. and they started their students started emailing them the same information that was on the form at the end of the day with support, and it grew into emailing them with the student's device as they wished. Next slide, please. And that's going to be Susaye.
All right, my favorite part, how to debrief after debriefing. And this is for parents. So when you're debriefing yourself, you can do some self-care by reflecting. You can practice mindfulness. You can organize your thoughts or do some journaling. You can actually engage in some self-care activities that help you relax and recharge. And we all need to do that. This could be something like taking a walk, or practicing deep breathing exercises, reading a book, or enjoying a hobby. Prioritizing yourself allows you to actually maintain your energy and emotional balance so that you can be fully present and supportive for your child. So, when discussing your major findings with a co-parent during your debriefing sessions with your child, this can be an opportunity to share insights about your child's emotional and behavioral state. And it provides an opportunity for collaborative problem solving and support. Hayley, next slide.
So if you have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat right now. I just wanted to share that before we answer any questions, here are some more resources if you want to dive deeper into the topic or want more information. These are all included in the handout that has been linked in the chat. It also has the information about the debriefing activities, all the important aspects of debriefing that we discussed during our presentation. Um, and yeah, so next slide, Lizette, and that'll be our questions.
Questions? Do anyone have questions?
Lizette, you're muted.
There we go. I turned my camera on, but not my voice. So if there were a couple questions so far, and if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to ask that right now. One real quick one for you, Hayley, specifically. I think when you were discussing the way you debrief with your children, do you want to just maybe share what GSRP is?
Yeah, I realized that as soon as it came out of my mouth. GSRP is the Great Start Readiness Program. It is the free pre-K for 4 years for eligible 4-year-olds in Michigan. It is it's just a really quality program to make sure that kids are getting access to education at a preschool level across the state. What else is there for us, Lizette?
Sure. So going back to just kind of some of the different examples that you all provided about debriefing. So I don't know if you have anything else to elaborate on, but one of the questions that came through from a parent was, what if their child is verbal, but just does not debrief, does not want to debrief? They're currently trying to do some very simple things. Just kind of asking, what they like or what they didn't like or something like that. But is there anything that you can maybe elaborate a little bit more on a child who is verbal, but just really is not really open to the whole debriefing process?
I think
I
that, go ahead, Sally.
Go ahead, Hayley. No, go ahead.
So I think it's gonna depend on probably their grade that they're in, but if there is a way to get some communication from the teacher too, but even starting out by saying simple things like what they're enjoying, what they don't like in school is a really good way to get started and really try to utilize, your knowledge of the routine to figure out when they are going to be at their most communicative, or really try to do it when you have them not distracted, but doing a preferred activity. If you can bring up things, just on the side. Did you have anything to add, Sally?
Yeah, I'm hoping that what you heard today will, help you with this. Some of the tips are more fun. So, maybe you can incorporate them to get them to, evolve. It's going to take time. I tell you with experience, it's going to take time. It's not going to be perfect. But you know, as they grow up, they'll get better at it. I know it seems when they're little, like, oh my God, they're going to be like this forever. What am I going to do? But that's not the case. They will mature. They will get better at, you know, talking about things. It's not always going to be easy. Probably never will be easy for some people, but you know, they'll get better at it.
Great, thank you. I think in terms of questions, those are all the questions. As I will share with the presenters, there were a lot of thank you for these great examples. So a lot of great feedback, just comments from those that attended today. So, but I don't see any other questions here. So at this time, I know we've got just a couple minutes left. Sally, Hayley, and Susaye, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation, very informative, and then also for answering questions that were provided by those in attendance today. I will go ahead and just close us out here. So as just a reminder for everyone, we did go ahead and answer your questions, but if for some reason you have other questions that pop in your head after today's presentation, or just need some assistance from the regional parent mentors, please, this is where you would come to find us. We're available on Facebook, Instagram, as well as a YouTube channel with a lot of our recorded events there, so that you can go ahead and preview those as needed. You can also reach us at our 1-800 number, which is 800-552-4821. And by calling that number, you can get connected directly with the regional parent mentor in your area. So that's also, you know, a really great and easy thing to do if you need some assistance. And then just as mentioned before, this is, you know, all of our state is has a regional parent mentors covered. They cover different counties. So this is the information, just a nice visual, and you can find this also on our website. And then lastly, as we close, again, or before we close, please go ahead and fill out the survey that I've added into the link a few times. In addition, you see the link for the handouts. We really do appreciate you being here today. And please know that all of the work that we do is totally free, and it is grant funded. We do report back to our funders, and we want to make sure that we are getting you all the information that you're looking for, and want to make sure that this information is actually useful to you. So if you could click that link, we would really appreciate your feedback. And then again, as mentioned, you can always reach us at 1-800-552-4821. And then lastly, Michigan Alliance for Families is an IDA grant-funded initiative of the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Special Education, and Michigan's Federal Parent Training and Information Center, funded by